Değerli misafirlerimiz bir kez daha hoş geldiniz. Avrupa'da enerji geçişi ve karbon düzenlemeleri oturumuna başlıyoruz. Bu bölümümüzün önce moderatörünü ardından panelistlerimizi sizlere takdim ederek sahneye davet edeceğim. Bu oturumun moderatörlüğünü Montel Forex Direktörü Sayın Nazlı Naseh gerçekleştirecek. Buyurunuz. Panelistlerimiz Argus Medya Küresel Lideri Erisa Şenerdem, sahneye davet ediyorum kendisini. Sıfır Emisyon Ticaret Birliği Türkiye Sekreteri Sayın Kutalmış Ersoy, sizi de sahneye davet ediyorum. Romanya Enerji Tedarikçileri Derneği Başkanı Lorentu Orlescu, sahneye buyurunuz. Ve Adlera Grup Kurucu ve Yönetim Kurulu Başkanı Paulina Seifert, sahneye buyurunuz. Oturum için sözü sizlere bırakıyorum.
Hoş geldiniz. Welcome and thank you for joining this session, Energy Transition and Carbon Regulations in Europe. My name is Nazlı Naseh and I am the director of Montal in Turkey, in Greece and in Italy. And I am joined by four esteemed speakers today. We're starting a bit late, but that's why I'd like to dive right into my questions, if that's okay. So we can start by talking about EU carbon pricing and market signals. Kutalmış Bey, maybe I can start with you with my first question. So the ETS should give a clear carbon price signal for long-term investments. But as you know, volatility and policy uncertainty continues to this day. From Zeta's point of view, is the ETS today providing the predictability investors need for large-scale renewables, hydrogen and CCUS projects?
Thank you so much, Nazlı Hanım. First of all, when we look at the emission trading system mechanisms, it includes, the idea is here to motivate the industry initially to decarbonize itself. Mm-hmm. There are some ambitions, the climate ambitions to be reached. These are long-term ambitions. And ETS creates like a price signal for carbon so that all the investors can rely on this, and based on this they can make their long-term investments. This may be carbon capture technologies, this can be hydrogen, this can be biomethane. There are various alternatives. Also with the ETS2, we will also see more alternative fuel supplies as well. The scalability of these alternative renewable projects and green projects is another question, but the question of ETS is something else. What I mean here, the ETS send a price signal, but this price signal should be very predictable as well. So when you have a prospect that emission trading system will have many volatilities, and these volatilities based on political interventions, regulatory changes, then the business people cannot easily focus on their investments in the long term. So this volatility and predictability question is one of the main problems of emission trading system, as far as I see. So this is what is needed to be adopted in Europe in general. When you discuss about ETS, maybe a general price floor having a ceiling and price floor can send more reliable signals easily to all industry people. Now, how it is seen is simply, this is a compliance cost. But ETS should be beyond a compliance cost, and it should easily cover encouragement and a motivation to decarbonize itself and get a reward. Currently, I think we only see the stick, but what is needed is more carrot.
Okay. Laurentio, how much of the problem is the pure price volatility, you think, versus regulatory complexity? And what are your thoughts about this?
Hello, hi. Both are problems, both volatility and also the regulation complexity. But if we are speaking about ETS, I will say that the biggest problem is that it take from the market some of the producer, then from the stock. some coal producer or gas producer are artificially increased cost and going on different level of the stack. If we are speaking about CBAM, it's quite challenging for everyone, especially for the Balkan region, because a lot of energy who is now flowing inside EU from outside EU will be taxed, and it's about a lot of fee. For example, as I understand, the import from Turkey will have to pay around 50 euro per megawatt, which is quite a lot.
Yes, CBAM and trade impacts are critical topics these days. Pauline, may I ask you my third question? So CBAM, I know you studied about this topic as well, so we'd really like to hear about your opinion. CBAM aims to prevent leakage and level the playing field, but also add costs in the reporting. So do you think CBAM driving upstream decarbonization or mainly shifting costs and let's say, reporting burdens?
Thank you so much. My name is Pauline. I've actually done my PhD recently on the topic of CBAM, focusing most on the steel and aluminium sectors and the exports in those sectors going to Germany. And we analyzed the cost effects, and we can see that especially the steel sector, when we're talking about exports going to Germany, will be affected, of course, depending on the emissions price tag that we will be seeing in Turkey locally, and which is currently in the works. I think the carbon border adjustment mechanism as a tool is necessary to prevent, of course, carbon leakage from a European perspective. And we can see with rising electricity prices in the European market, especially when we look at Germany, which is kind of the backbone for a lot of energy-intensive industry in the European Union, that these sectors, such as, for example, the chemical industry, are highly affected. And they're also highly affected by the carbon pricing that is being enacted in the EU through the ETS, and voices have become louder and louder in terms of locational attractiveness to produce in Germany, where the carbon pricing, apart from, of course, the electricity prices, does affect the industry heavily. To name you an example, for example, in northern Rhine-Westphalia, which is the powerhouse for a lot of energy-intensive industry, the chemical industry has now come to an agreement with the local government that there will be pressure enacted on carbon pricing levels on a European level, especially because the phasing out of free allowances starting in 2026 is a big challenge for this industry. And then the free allowances that will, by the end of the 2030s, will be totally phased out, will of course also have price pressure on that industry. So in terms of that, the CBAM is a very, very important tool for the European Union, of course, to in long term protect also their own local industries, and to give a carbon footprint kind of visibility through adding a financial cost to it, and through that hopefully also fueling decarbonization globally. When we look at it from a short-term perspective, and especially speaking, I think, for small and medium-sized businesses, it is more of an administrative burden. And I think that a lot of the companies, and we can also see that in some of the exporting sectors here in Turkey, are maybe in that sense kind of overwhelmed, and I think that's a global development that we can see, and the EU has readjusted CBAM policy in terms of what will be covered under the CBAM to kind of soften the effect on exporters abroad. Of course, always having to keep in mind the effects potentially on the competitiveness of their own industries. So I always say that from the EU perspective, the CBAM is a very, very strategically important tool, pricing carbon emissions, and of course preventing carbon leakage. On the other hand side, this of course needs to be paired with long-term incentives and like in-depth cooperation models also with sectors abroad, because at the end of the day, when we add a carbon price or carbon tax onto imports within the EU, this will also affect our supply chain security. Maybe we will become more dependent on certain industrial countries because others cannot follow the decarbonization pipeline as fast as others. I think that we will see maybe a competitive shift there. And of course, we also have, we need to help these countries because we will see inflation effects in the EU otherwise as well, because imports will become more expensive.
Laurentia, would you like to comment on how Romanian suppliers' opinion shape about this? The power CBAM, how it affects wholesale, retail, cross-border contract structures?
Yeah, definitely it will affect entire market. Already we have seen on cross-border capacity auction, there was a different approach. On border, some auctions was postponed, some other, the price of the auction decreased drastically, and there are many challenges here. And we really expect from European Union a clarification. We expect a guideline to be issued as soon as possible. We hope till end of this year, in order to clarify few aspects about CBAM. For example, let's say the PPA topic, the PPA for renewables who are outside Europe but has contract with European company. Also the transit, because except Romanian TSO, which is separate transit from import and export. All other TSO, they don't recognize transit. For them, they see it as import and export. That means, for example, one energy flow who is going from one EU country to other EU country, but passing through a non-EU country, will be taxed, which is it is quite strange. There are a lot of these small topics which are quite challenging for traders, and we really hope this, let's say, clarification to come till end of this year.
Okay, so it seems like the uncertainty is a bit everywhere about this whole topic. Elisa, my next question is to you, because you have some experience with CBAM in other commodities, like cement, and I think it's working. Yeah. Cement and steel. So from your market perspective, from Argus, what is the experience there, and can you explain us a bit?
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone, and yeah, thank you for the question, Nazlı. I actually sit with the carbon team at Argus, and the bulk of what we do is we observe the market, develop price benchmarks that companies can use for their hedging, long-term planning, etc., and then analyze the drivers of market fundamentals. Yeah. Supply and demand, and regulation is a big part of it. But I have to admit that in the past few years, I can't only call myself a carbon analyst or a carbon expert, but we've started to become experts of every other single commodity. And a big reason for this, of course, is because of the wider decarbonization efforts as well from heavy to abate industries. But CBAM also has a very big role to play on this. So anything that the European Commission says about CBAM has an outright impact on the operations and on the market fundamentals of other commodities. And yeah, you did mention cement and steel. These are two of the sectors that are subject to certain goods from these sectors are subject to CBAM that will start implementation from 1st of January next year. And because implementation will start from 1st of January, but the payments will start only next year, so from February 2027, there is often this misperception created that we can sit down now and do nothing about it until we see 2027 arrive. But actually what we are seeing in the market is that CBAM has already had a significant impact, particularly in the producing countries. I can talk about the impact that we have been seeing so far this year, around about mid this year, so from June, let's say, onwards. We've seen a lot of cement and steel companies, but even companies from other sectors, starting to stock up throughout Europe their products. Wherever they had the capability to stock up, they have done so. And we have noticed a significant increase in flows as well from non-EU countries into EU. So the imported good deliveries into the EU have been unusually high this year. And the reason for this is that there is so many uncertainties still about how CBAM will be implemented, because the Commission has still to publish methodologies, final benchmark values for carbon intensity, etc., that it is very hard for companies to take a final position and to decide on the final price of their end product without having a kind of visibility into what the CBAM cost will be. And one way to mitigate this kind of risk has been to increase significantly the stocks wherever they could throughout Europe. And with this also comes the anticipation, and we do know, because we have confirmed outrightly with companies, that there will be much less orders for the at least first quarter, but probably first half of 2026. So the orders for deliveries throughout the first half of 2026 for certain goods that are subject to CBAM have dropped significantly for this reason, because a part of it has been met with overstocking, so build-up of stock, and a part of it is because of uncertainty. Companies don't know how to invoice their counterparties. Other impacts that we have seen, actually the CBAM idea was floated in 2019, and the law was approved in 2023. So companies within Europe, but also outside of Europe, have had a little bit of time to think about this and make some preparations. And what we do see, for example, with steel producers in Turkey even, they have thought about, they have started to think about how they can greenify or defossilize at least certain parts of their supply chain. So we already see this impact as well in the origin producing countries. There is also, on the commercial side of things, quite a bit of impact, and probably this will be my last talking point here, that counterparties have started to sort of negotiate the cost sharing for CBAM, because on paper, by the European law, it is the importing company that needs to pay for the CBAM certificate. However, what we are seeing now is that importing companies, which could as well be EU-based, they are asking the suppliers to share some of the cost bearing for CBAM there. And due to uncertainties that I mentioned earlier, there is still a lot of rules or methodologies that have not been announced yet from the Commission. There have also been attempts, and we have confirmed with several counterparties, of introducing a little bit of flexibility, especially for contracts that are longer than 1 year, where you wouldn't have known probably that everything would be so late by the end of this year. So what we see is also companies trying to say, okay, I'm going to pay you at least this much for this product, but also a top-up if the carbon price turns out to be so-and-so, etc. So a little bit of flexibility as well there. And lastly, but not least, because we are talking about emission markets, carbon markets, and how these give signals to the overall industries to decarbonize. Unfortunately, hedging fully through CBAM certificates is not possible. There is quite a few limitations, and also the CBAM certificate. So it is possible in an indirect way, is what I'm trying to say. You can't actually trade the CBAM certificate in a secondary market, yeah. You can actually try to resell it back to the Commission, the European Commission, but even that has limitations, so to a certain quantity only. And therefore, what a lot of companies are doing, for example, steel makers or cement companies, etc., is getting their head around how they can create this proxy hedging, the so-called proxy hedging instruments, where they say, okay, let's have a look at the secondary market. What is the most liquid contract? There is usually December frontier for EU ETS. So what companies are trying to do is to take some hedging positions, but by trading in the secondary markets. And the CBAM costs will be calculated from auction results prices in the primary market, which is more of correlated with the spot product. So there will be a difference there, which they still, that spread between the December 25, for example, that is the most liquid contract in the carbon market, and the spot product, there is still a spread there, which companies now are trying to understand how they can manage. And therefore, it's not a full hedge, but it's a proxy hedge. So you're using an indirect instrument in order to manage the price volatility in the EU ETS markets.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Very interesting insights. Proxy hedging markets. I think we can also talk a bit about the situation with Turkish companies. CBAM is also a very important topic here in Turkey, and for energy intensive, as a major exporter of energy intensive goods. Kutalmış Bey, how are Turkish exporters are coping with CBAM and CBAM readiness? I think that's a very important thing to talk about at the moment.
Thank you for the question. So starting from this hedging point of view, what we will see more in Turkey as well, more hedging towards CBAM. This is definitely a must-go for major manufacturers in Turkey and directly exporting these energy-intensive goods to Turkey. So, and this proxy hedging means basically they need to take a position according to the prices at the EU ETS prices. But simply, as a non-EU country, how can you become part of EU emission trading system is also another question mark. So here, there should be more innovative solutions, how even the medium-sized manufacturers who are exporting to Turkey should be able to part of EU ETS system. So they need to trade, simply. They need to join this over-the-counter bilateral agreements. They should make their ISDA agreements and have more EU ETSs and take a position. So taking a position is a must-do in this environment. We know that EU ETS prices may increase quite fast based on the free allowances. But still, if there will be already a cost to be paid by the Turkish industry, at least they can take a position and at least they can see how much price they will have when they are selling their goods. That's one of the important things. They need more certainty. But of course, from a commercial point of view, this can serve like an insurance, but really compliance with CBAM is also another issue. What I see, for example, yesterday I had a discussion with one of the steel manufacturers, and they told that, you know what, we have our renewables. Our solar panels are established. Some of them on-site, some of them off-site, but we have almost 300 megawatts solars established. And I am selling goods to Europe, but at the same time, I'm producing green electrons. Just tell me how I can show this to European Union when I'm selling these goods. This is the question here. Here, there are some, for example, we also listened to Minister Bayraktar today. He also explained how the renewable electricity is booming, what are the wind capacities now, the recent auctions. There is huge interest here. There is the renewable capacity increasing so fast here. So, but how to show this is the question mark. And when I ask this question to my European colleagues, I'm based in Brussels, simply you need to show your green PPAs, you need to be able to calculate your direct emissions and show us. Okay, then how? Just show me what kind of a standard does this PPAs have. Just show me how you can follow all these electrons. Just show me my way. That's the question. And when it comes to that question, there are various uncertainties still. Even in the default values, even in this legal architecture, there are major bottlenecks, regulatory bottlenecks that we cannot explain. If we want to, as a Turkey, want to become part of this system more integrated, when the EU should first set the rule book and explain this is the way how should it be done. So currently, I think that is the missing. I also see, from the European perspective, EU ETS prices create major competitiveness problems because the prices and the costs are so high, and simply the carbon leakage, as Paul and I said, it is one of the major problems. The industry can relocate to some other places and produce there. So, but there are some countries who are willing to cooperate and join this system and play fairly. I think this is the missing link here. So for example, in Turkey, there is also a plan as of, I think next month, the Turkish emission trading system will be launched as well. This is also another bridge. We can simply, Turkey can become part of this emission trading system in Europe as well. There can be some potential linked scenarios so that the industry here can rely on domestic emission trading system and reduce to some extent their CBAM costs. This is how it should be done, and the rule books is also quite clear actually, but just we need to send the signal from the European point of view as regulations, this is how it should be done. If there will be any way, any progress on this side, I see that Turkish industry is quite ready. Another problem is also this voluntary carbon markets. I'm also quite busy with carbon markets. So Turkish industry always bet on this voluntary market. So they bet on it, but simply when in this era, I think we are going into more mandatory carbon market world. And if there will be any convergence between voluntary carbon market and mandatory market is still a question mark. So I attended also COP30 in Belém. So what I have seen here that there will be more potential outcomes of convergence between these voluntary markets and mandatory markets. So if Turkish industry can still rely on voluntary market and somehow get their certificates recognized by their own mandatory markets, this could be also a solution for them. But pricing-wise, I don't know. That could be a problem for them. So how they will price this, how the Turkish emission system will accept them is still a question mark. This is also a homework to do here in Turkey for the decision makers. But going back to this CBAM discussion again, also in COP, what I've seen, there is also a political side of this discussion. Because I observed, I was also part of the delegation, and I've seen that CBAM was quite political, especially the countries from Global South mostly were saying, this is a trade measure. We are trying to decarbonize ourselves. We are doing something, but by putting us that much of cost, simply you are killing the business cases here. So they see mostly this is as a non-cooperative tool. So by way of this, we still see more like other CBAM tools in other areas, in other regions. For example, even in the Turkish legislation for from the climate law, we see even a Turkish CBAM. Simply, what's the point here? I think it's some sort of a diplomatic clash. It's reciprocity, simply. This is how it's shown. So the EU here, I think, just creates more fragmentation by focusing mostly on CBAM and not explaining how to comply with it. This creates more CBAMization in around the world. And I think this is a major problem. And even in COP, that created a major problem in the negotiations. Some counterparties try to renegotiate already closed items just because of this. Now with the COP in Turkey next year, in November, we will see more of this discussion. So I would not surprise seeing CBAM is one of the major discussion points under agenda items.
Pauline, is there anything you would like to ask, to add to what Kutalmış Bey is saying?
From a perspective, or maybe from the European perspective, as I said, I think the point that we shouldn't forget here is the problem of carbon leakage and the price pressures that we are really facing in the European Union. I'm German, so kind of following the German economic development, I think a lot of you are. We can see that with this push for decarbonization and with the climate goals that we have in place, we have to find economic tools to put a price on carbon. Because otherwise, no investor, no private sector company, and correct me, I think there are a lot of you also in the room, will actually take a step towards decarbonization just for the sake of, in a way, saving the planet. Like, unfortunately, this is also a reality, I think, that we have to face with. And so I actually think that the CBAM, as I said, is a long-term very strategic tool from a European perspective, but I totally agree that from the administrative perspective currently and the execution, that the upcoming years will be tough, I think, for everyone here. And from a perspective of Turkey, I would like to add that we are very much dependent on the European market in terms of our exports. It's 50% of Turkish exports that go to the European market. And this is definitely something that we have to keep in mind. So a local ETS is also something that is very important here, to keep money here.
Okay, thank you. Elisa?
Just to add to what my colleagues said there, that also we have to keep in mind that it's the first time that a region has gathered up to do this in this big scale, and it is an extremely complicated issue. So I'm sure that at the end of the day, I mean, this is a new policy, and some of the things will be learned by doing, and there might be mistakes or loopholes. There are a lot of other loopholes that, for purposes of time, we can't sit down and open up and discuss here. But I wanted to also maybe close this chapter of the discussion in another positive note, that CBAM has already had quite some impact throughout the globe. So look at the ETS markets that have started to surface everywhere in the world now. We have just under 40 systems, mechanisms, market-based mechanisms that have been created from the beginning of this year, and we were only in the 20s or so just a few years ago. And a big driver for this has been CBAM. So it is complex, and there are a lot of issues still to be sorted, but yeah, I would like to agree with Pauline that companies won't do this voluntarily, governments won't do this voluntarily, so there is need for somehow a push for this. Thank you.
So there will be some cost of learning, let's say, in the beginning. All right, thank you for that note. Laurentio, is there anything you want to add, or I'm passing to my next question, which is also to you.
It's quite challenging, the CBAM, and for us it's difficult because we ask a lot of clarification on this topic, and until now we have no official clarification. I repeat that we are really expecting this guideline to be issued till end of this year, because from 1st January we are on cost. All the exports to EU will be charged.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so our minister also mentioned about this fast-scaling renewables integration. My next question is also to you, by the way, Laurentio. I'd like to talk about the power system readiness, which is something I don't think is talked enough. Do you think grids, storage and flexibility services are scaling fast enough for rapid renewables integration?
Wow, it's a huge subject here.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not so simple to respond. But let's say, I will split in two. Let's speak separately about large scale renewables. which at least in Romania, there are very clear procedure for authorization. And in case the distributor or the transport system operator has no, let's say, the grid, it's not enough for them, they have a plan to reinforce the grid. On the other hand, what is quite challenging, at least now in Romania, it's small renewables. It is rooftop solar. We are naming prosumers. And we had experience that in few years we got around 3,000 megawatt installed in prosumers, which prosumer are completely non-controllable. Then they not only that they produce, but what they evacuate in the grid, it's the sum between consumption and production. And this is quite challenging, firstly for the grid operator, meaning the distribution system operator, the transport system operator, but also for the system operator, for the country system operator, for the national dispatch center. Because 3,000 megawatt is not neglectable. And if we are thinking about springtime, when we have a lot of sun, sometimes there are real challenges to shut down base load units just to not be too long. That's about grid. What I will say also about renewables, we in Romania, now we had one first wave of renewable investment in 2008-2010. Now we are on the second wave. I will say that for solar at least we are on the end of the second wave, because already the banks, they are reluctant to finance solar standalone. And it started a new wave for hybrid project, solar plus battery, or for battery, simple battery, which I think now it's quite interesting and important, because we have a huge spread between solar profile and baseload, and this spread, this price spread, it's increasing day by day. Then battery, it's important, and I think the return of investment for battery is quite fast.
Thank you very much. We can talk about the industry decarbonization pathways. My next question will be to you, Pauline. So heavy industry has multiple decarbonization routes on the table. Which ones do you see realistic at scale by, let's say, midterm, a bit longer, 2030, 40? What do you think?
I think it kind of depends on what sector we are looking at. We have seen some lighthouse projects, especially in the European Union, on decarbonizing energy-intensive industry. For example, for the steel sector, we have direct reduction as a possible technology, or we see that in Turkey also a lot, electric furnaces. So here we will need renewable hydrogen, then long midterm to fire these, of course, technologies. And for the time in between, the plan was actually to use natural gas. And I always like to tell that tale of the green transformation journey in Germany and the role of natural gas here. We talk a lot about hydrogen, green hydrogen, renewable hydrogen today, but of course, with no infrastructure currently in place, and the pricing on electricity, actually producing this renewable hydrogen on a competitive scale, especially comparing it to natural gas, is still very challenging. In Germany, we've pretty much relied on the natural gas prices that were prior to the Russian war against Ukraine, of course, low, and the accessibility was given to actually move fast in our green transition process. And we can see that with the markets and the prices developing in the manner they did a couple of years ago, what effect this has also had on the green transition process in Germany. For cement, of course, it's fundamentally different. Here we have CCS and CCSU, CCU technologies that need to come in just because of the production process, the chemical reaction process. When you produce cement, you cannot just go for electrifying. For using green hydrogen, you actually have to find a way to store the carbon that you have. We have now passed a law recently in November where, for example, in Germany is now allowed to store carbon, but the technology itself is definitely not ready at the scale where we would like it to be. And when we look at the climate goals that we have in Europe, for example, for the cement industry, to achieve these goals, you would have to scale up the CCS, CCSU project in the 2030s by a lot, which is, in my opinion, probably not going to be achievable looking at the technology and where we at currently. When we look at the chemical industry here again, decarbonization pathways, you will be able to have a mix also through electrification. We always say electrification, by the way, goes first. Wherever I want to decarbonize, I want to try to replace my processes with electricity, with green electricity, of course. We have already heard the challenges connected to the expansion of that, but we say this is the easier way and less cost-intensive way to go here. And then, of course, where we can substitute in the production of, for example, methanol, ammoniac, we will have to use, again, renewable hydrogen. When we look at it from a more macro perspective, overall, I would say maybe apart from CCS, CCSU technologies, technology is pretty much ready around the world. The problem is that bringing it up to big scale for a lot of companies and investors, there are a lot of challenges connected to it. There are several tools, for example, contracts for difference. We need to send pricing signals, pricing certainty to those sectors, because no company will invest in creating green lead markets for their green products when they don't know what the value of that green product will be midterm, long-term. And I think this is one of the biggest bottlenecks that we can see right now from a European perspective, where there's a lot of price pressure globally. The economy is under, I think, a lot of pressure currently. And so to remain competitive, a lot of companies, rather than looking at how can I decarbonize, is more how can I actually produce where I'm currently producing in the European market. And then, coming back to what I was initially saying with my first question, I think it is very much important that we pair these decarbonization efforts, CBAM, ETS, tools like that with the right policies, and that we support our sectors from a policy perspective with contracts for difference, for example. We need to support in helping to develop green lead markets. We need to give incentives for companies when they are actually decarbonizing apart from them, from the ETS tool, but we also need to put a price on carbon that is being saved, for example, to allow these companies to remain competitive on a global scale. And I think this is where also from a European perspective we have a lot of room to still grow into, because bureaucracy is unfortunately, I think, slow. And I was previously very much leading the Turkish-German Energy Partnership, which is a very long-term project between the two countries. And there we've also had a lot of discussions on how to, support, of course, this decarbonization process from a policy perspective. And I think what policymakers have to keep in mind here as well is that Of course, we want livable markets, but certain transformational processes need to be supported through the right policy instruments, economic incentive instruments. Otherwise, I think it's a very, very tough task to accomplish.
Thank you. What about biomass? Like it's proposed as a low carbon replacement. It is that. What do you think its industrial biomass supply is sustainable? Do you think it's a sustainable source?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I've actually covered the biomass markets before carbon for a very extensive period of time, and what I can say, I mean, this is actually. There is often a misperception about the use of biomass and how it connects in terms of carbon, the carbon accounting. And there have been debates in the past where this has been discussed. The fact is that this has been scientifically proved, and it's well embedded into all EU legislation, that biomass is a zero-rated commodity if you're talking as a fuel that can be combusted to generate energy, be it power or other types of energies. And the reason for that is that the CO2 is actually captured for the photosynthesis when the plant grows. So at the moment when you have the plant itself grow, or the crop itself grow, depending on whether you're talking agricultural biomass or forest biomass, the CO2 is captured there. And therefore, at the point of combustion, you're just releasing what you have already captured. And this is the difference between we call this the biogenic CO2 cycle. It is a closed cycle, and that's the reason why it is called, it is rated as zero emission, as a fuel. Whereas with the fossil fuel cycle, it's just an open one. So you take coal from underground, you burn it, and you let the CO2 go into the atmosphere, so there is no coming back through photosynthesis. Now, still there are other important considerations, and I think I really appreciate you asking about sustainability of sourcing, because that's the key word here. So biomass will be zero rated as long as it is sustainably sourced. If you go harvest the forest and you never grow it back, then you don't have a forest tomorrow, and therefore it's not a sustainable way, and therefore you haven't captured back that CO2 that might be let into the atmosphere. So that is really critical. And forestry is one of the oldest activities that humankind has been doing since we existed. And there is like a sort of, not in legal writing, but there is this understanding between humans and nature that, yeah, I need to give back if I want to take back. But sustainable practices are really critical here. And what the industry has been doing is that they have set voluntary requirements, voluntarily sustainability requirements even before the European Union started up the debate to regulate the sustainability criteria, etc. And I fully agree, why not have a little bit of an added up layer of checks there. But biomass itself can help significantly the hard-to-abate sectors to decarbonize. For example, we were talking about steel earlier and electrification of heavy industries. Steel processes still will need some carbon for their chemical reactions, and that's the only way to secure that without using fossil fuels is to use, for instance, biochar that is created from biomass. So there is quite a role, and I think that the debate now is shifting rather than discussing whether it's zero-rated or not. The European Union just a few weeks back published its bioeconomy strategy, and I think that from now on we see a shift in discussions on whether what is the priority, because at the end of the day biomass is a limited resource. You can't have it grow forever. There is a spatial limit
Absolutely.
to it, and therefore, and there is not enough forest for to use biomass to decarbonize all sectors, so to speak. So you have to prioritize, and I think that nowadays the discussion is more around whether we want to use biomass to decarbonize to produce biomaterials like biochemicals, bioplastics, etc., or we want to use biomass for combustion purposes. It is a trade-off. It's a hard one at times, but depending on what country you're looking at, their abundance of biomass, etc., countries are trying to organize this in different ways and prioritize it in different ways. So yeah.
I actually have many more questions, but we have limited time because we started a bit late. I think I will just have two last questions and then have one single question for the same question for all our speakers. I'd like to go a bit more into rules and regulations, and my question will be to Mr. Kutalmış. So, how do you think EU rules, state aid, and differing national targets create gaps or opportunities for faster rollout?
Yeah, thank you, Nazlı Hanım. So when last week I was attending the World LNG conference to discuss about bio-LNG. I spent some time with American friends and we were discussing about some recent regulation on Russian gas ban. And I was trying to explain how the other stakeholders in Europe works together, how the countries stand themselves, and this is not simply a EU regulation. There are also this is a EU regulation, but there are other stakeholders behind it. So Europe is not one country. So there are major other stakeholders shaping all this policy agenda, and this is maybe the beauty of EU with this democratic cycle. So when we look at this, but on the green subsidies, what we see a major European umbrella now as the temporary state aid frameworks. Based on this framework, now European Union can give more investment, can allocate more funds, larger funds into directly industries, especially the renewables on this side. So this allows that from a competition law perspective, more room for private actors to take in and create commercial business models. But what is problematic is the price distortion between regions in Europe. So when we look at the Western Europe, if they're simply Western Europe has more access to larger capitals and they can easily utilize larger amounts to decarbonize their supply chains and industries. But when you look at the eastern flank of Europe, you see less access to capital and it takes more time for them to decarbonize, although the growth rates are much larger on that side. So this creates some sort of a price distortion between these regions, and this may create also a potential problem for the union structural situation at the moment from the competition law perspective. So we can see different price parameters here taking in part. And also, as you said, the national targets are quite influential in shaping their national agenda. But when it comes to cooperation between nations, still it is very problematic. Let's take an example of the guarantees of origins. This is one of the major drivers for renewable electricity. When we look at them, if one trader wants to sell a guarantee origin GEO issued, let's say, in Poland, and wants to sell this to Germany to make a cross-border trade, this is simply a really hard process because to recognize all these GEO systems, there are some progress on this, but still it is not utilized as like electricity or gas market. So we try to commercialize all this renewable business concept based sending price signals for all the industry so that they can rely on this, but at the same time, these price signals created by trades, created by these business models. So, but here what is missing is we have lots of fragmentations due to these different national prospects in the region. So this is one of the major bottlenecks that I see, which creates some problems to reach even the national targets.
Completely agree. Would you like to add anything about this topic, Pauline, Laurentio? Anything you would like to add to?
Yeah, what to say? And I think on long term, the biggest challenge will be to, let's say, to find the equilibrium between production and consumption. But not like balancing it, but let's say the production curve and the consumption curve to be somehow to match. Because with this lot of investment in renewable, as you see, the production profile changed in time. But unfortunately, the consumption profile didn't change. And we have huge challenges already to balance that. And I expect in the future the challenge will be even bigger. That's why I think it's normal to focus on I will say new product, mainly for consumer, like for example demand response, or let's say hourly tariffs, or load shedding, which somehow will put together these two profiles. Thank you.
Okay, I arrived to my last question, which I think will be starting with you, Eriza, if that's okay. What do you think is the single biggest risk to Europe meeting its 2030 and 2050 targets?
This is the million-dollar question,
Yes.
really. I wish I knew the answer, or I wish I had a crystal ball to sort of decide. Yeah, it's a tough one, but I would like to refer back to the ministerial address in the morning. The minister talked about the vision of what we expect to happen later on in the coming couple of decades, and that is more electrification, because that's the easiest route for now to decarbonize. So there is a lot of need for that. But also, we are also undergoing not only a decarbonization transformation or energy transformation, but we're also undergoing a digital transformation in the world with the AI. Now the demand for power, etc., is increasing massively. So I think that if I had only one wish to make today on behalf of the EU and its ability to reach out its net zero goals, that would be more investment and more fast tracking of permitting for building and upgrading the grid infrastructure, so that when we come to those massive demand scenarios for electricity, we're not let down and experience a second Spanish outage.
Okay. Fast permitting. Okay. Kutalmış Bey, what do you think?
Yeah. What I see is as the biggest risk, there is a really tangible green agenda of Europe. But now I think it's time to have also a pragmatic approach towards the green agenda, and the more commercial-oriented regulations and approaches should be developed in Europe. This is also what I heard a lot in also COP. US, for example, there were no high presence at the last COP, but the main discussion was, okay, but US businessmen are still here because they see a business model, they have a commercial case here investing in green businesses and decarbonization paths. So I think Europe should focus on that angle more and have more pragmatic approaches. That will be one of the risk, less pragmatism, and immediate action, more pragmatism.
Laurentio?
Sometimes when we wish something very hard, we forget why we wish that. Then sometimes our goal we are forgetting the entire electricity sector. It's mainly focused on consumer. And all these, let's say, in order to get this goal, we have a lot of support scheme, a lot of taxes, a lot of incentive, which at the end it's paid by the consumer. Then all this goal, it's burden on the consumer side. And already we see on some industry, there decrease of consumption because electricity cost is so high, then some industry, they're simply shutting down. Then that's my biggest concern about goal. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Pauline?
Yes,
Last.
I don't actually have to add so much. I want to thank my fellow panelists. I think a major issue or risk is the administrative and regulatory readiness, consistency, and with that goes also certainty. I don't think that technological feasibility or feasibility of the projects is the main risk. I think this is something, once you have the right tools in place, the right frameworks in place from a regulatory political perspective, I think this is something that you can actually positively influence, but without sending those signals, giving investors certainty, reliability, and putting a price on carbon. That is also, in a way, consistent and can be planned, foreseen. Same goes for products. I think that we will have, or it will be a big challenge to reach climate targets, not only in the European Union, but globally. Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the audience? No? Okay. Thank you so much. Yes. Okay, we do. What is CBAM effect on European LNG imports? Qatar already said they will hold LNG supplies to the EU under new regulations. US are likely to do the same. How do you see a risk that CBAM will lead to a new EU gas energy crisis? Who would like to answer? You? Yeah?
I can try to get it. So, as far as I know, CBAM doesn't cover natural gas, and maybe, but CBAM related or on the same track, we have EU methane regulation and emission regulation. This may be also a major problem for LNG imports. But this is not a question of CBAM, but a general approach from Europe. Methane is also another issue for reaching the climate targets, because also this is one of the major polluters as well. And Qatar already just said that they will hold it, their LNG supplies going to Europe, if there will be no going back from the EU methane regulation. And if this regulation will be adopted like this, we could expect much green premia going to Europe, and this may increase the prices, because simply it will add another compliance cost and more major problems. But from a geopolitical perspective, everything is possible. Last time, the EU methane regulation, for example, was delayed just because of this. So if we see similar, we can easily see the similar approaches. And as far as I know, late December, there will be another committee discussions on this, how it should be adopted and what should be the strategy for EU. But simply when something is a decision taken at the European Parliament, European Commission, and also Council, they should agree on this. There are trialogues. And when something is agreed on, reinstate something is sometimes hard. So I do not expect a major backlash, but there could be some, again, pragmatic approaches to solve this. But including CBAM, including natural gas in CBAM, that I don't know. But sometimes European Union is also very creative.
Thank you very much. Lorenzo, maybe you would like to answer the last one. How to prove that we deliver green electricity to Eastern Europe under CBAM in next year?
Yeah, why to prove it? Because now as regulation it doesn't matter if it's going into European Union, green or non-green energy, it's taxed anyway. But as I explained, we hope till end of this year to have some methodology in order to clarify also this aspect, because we have a lot of PPAs with green energy, and now those PPAs are exposed. How to prove it? It's simple. If it is an existing PPA, it's more than enough to prove that it's green electricity.
Thank you very much. I think the next session is about to start, so we need to close our session. It has been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.